Ladies and gentlemen, fellas, welcome back to the #1 fantasy and sports betting podcast. How y'all doing? Sal Vetri here, and let's talk about the Saturday slate. There's 10 games today. Now, just like last week, I'm assuming as I record this Friday before the slates drop, I'm assuming for DFS purposes, they will break it into a 2 and an 8 game slate. I will be covering the 2 game slate on Patreon. We will have tiers, rankings, and the game notes. But for the purposes of this video, the main slate will be the 8 game slate. So we'll be discussing the plays from those 8 games, as well as a little bit of props action. And if you're curious in any of the betting lines I have for this main slate, we'll discuss those in the Discord, as there's a lot of games to talk through and not a lot of time. And don't mind the beautiful shirt and the beautiful fade. We're doing that for you people. There's no special occasion. It's preseason. We got a lot of games. That's basically all it is. Preseason with a lot of games. So I'm getting dressed up for all you beautiful people. I mean, you see most analysts in this industry looking like they're coming from the spelling bee, looking like they're coming from band camp. Nothing wrong with either of those things, but the outfits for the most part. I mean, come on, fellas, ladies, sprucing this shit up a little bit. We're feeling good. We're looking good. Feel good, play good, baby. Let's get into it. Now let's start off with the quarterbacks, and we're going to start off with a fella who looks fantastico. And that man's name is Tyler Huntley, and he's on the Baltimore Ravens. And the reason why I'm singling him out is Lamar Jackson didn't play in week 1. There's no status update as of this recording. Again, check the tiers for any updates, because there will definitely be some for these 16 teams coming into tomorrow afternoon and evening. But Lamar Jackson, we don't know what he's going to do. Maybe he plays a drive or two. Maybe he doesn't play at all. But Trace McSorley, the former Penn State standout in 2019 preseason, he's not playing. He's done for the rest of the preseason, got hurt in the last game. So all that leaves is Tyler Huntley. Now, they did just sign a 4th quarterback. They signed Kenji Bahar. And Kenji Bahar, for the most part, has not played in the NFL, right? He was signed 2 days ago. He's basically a camp body. Maybe he plays a quarter. I'm expecting Tyler Huntley to play at least 2 quarters, at minimum 2 quarters, and the upside of 3 to 3.5 quarters in this game. And the reason that is important is it's a lot of playing time, 1, but 2, he is a mobile quarterback. Last week alone, 5 carries, 43 yards, and a touchdown. In college, massive rushing totals. He averaged over 34 rushing yards per game in college, and last week alone, he already played 52% of the snaps, and that's with Trace McSorley playing 48% of the snaps. Upside here to potentially play 2/3 of the game, which just screams positive success in the preseason NFL. So he stands out for me. The next player who stands out is Sam Ehlinger, and the Colts are expected to just play 2 quarterbacks in this game. I don't think that Brett Hundley, who did not play week 1, is going to play this week, according to the head coach. Sam Ehlinger is going to start this week and play the full first half. Jacob Eason will play the full second half. But Sam Ehlinger has massive upside, again, because of the rushing mobility. Come here real close. Let me tell you what Sam Ehlinger did in college. Over 1,900 rushing yards in his college career. He averaged over 41 rushing yards per game. I mean, if you just get the average in this game from Sam Ehlinger of 4 fantasy points on the ground, that's standout. If we start that with potentially a floor for Sam Ehlinger, who also was solid through the air in week 1 of the preseason, and he had a good amount of time. He played exactly 50% of the snaps. He played the second half last week. He had 15 attempts, over 150 yards, averaged 10.3 yards per attempt. He's looked great in camp. The rookie, I like Sam Ehlinger a lot. The next quarterback I'm going to talk about is Bryce Perkins, who was a letdown last week. By all accounts, Bryce Perkins was a letdown. He only played 22 snaps. He only had 10 attempts. He did rush for 23 yards. But Bryce Perkins, and there's still no Matt Stafford. There's still no John Wolford. There's only going to be 2 quarterbacks, Devlin Hodge and Bryce Perkins. Perkins averaged over 99 rushing yards per game in college, and he had solid college numbers of around 7 yards per attempt, around average for the college football. Now, I am definitely concerned with last week's performance, but I expect a lot more regression towards more rushing yards for Bryce Perkins in this one. So those are 3 quarterbacks that stand out, and there's about another half a dozen or so that I'm prioritizing. Again, this is for the 8 games. I mean, there's Jacob Eason on the opposite side of that Colts game, going to play the second half. There's Devlin Hodges, who should see a lot of running in about a half of football for the Rams, opposite Bryce Perkins. There's guys like Logan Woodside, and the other big thing that I will mention is Nathan Peterman. Nathan Peterman played 99% of the snaps last week. Derek Carr did not play, and Marcus Mariota was injured in practice, not allowing him to play. They have Case Cookus also on the roster, who only played 1 snap last week, as he was a late addition to the roster. So I expect him to be more worked in if Mariota was to miss. We'll track the status there. We'll update it in the tiers. But that's where we're at right now with the quarterback position. We now slide into the running backs. Hit the like button if you're enjoying this video thus far. Again, I do have the tiers for every single position updated. We have for this slate 49 pages of notes for the full 10 games on Saturday. Every single player that could potentially do something has details on what their involvement should be and what it was last week, and even more. So be sure to check it out down below on Patreon, along with my ranks and tiers for every preseason slate, heading into, of course, the regular season. At the running back position, we'll start with Keyshawn Vaughn, who wasn't efficient on the ground last week by any means, but he got all the volume in the world. They were expecting him to see a lot of preseason run, and they still expect him to see that for Tampa Bay, and it's going to look good in this one. He had 11 attempts last week, 6 more than any other running back. Now, he wasn't efficient, 27 rushing yards, but he got in the end zone. But the other nice thing to see was, as he was in college, the rookie from last year, he was involved in the receiving game. 13 routes run, 3 targets, 2 catches for 10 yards. We'll take that. We'll take the 13 opportunities. That is a rare number that any running back, any player in general sees in preseason football. Keyshawn Vaughn wheels up again this week heading into week 2. Next up, I want to talk about Trey Ragas, the rookie, an undrafted player. So no Josh Jacobs last week, no Kenyon Drake. Jalen Richard is out an extended period of time. As of right now, we don't have an update on if Drake or Jacobs are going to play. But last week, Trey Ragas saw a massive 40 snaps last week. He saw absolutely amazing usage. We were just talking about Keyshawn Vaughn. 13 attempts on the ground, 62 yards and a touchdown. 16 routes run led to 5 targets. I just told you 13 opportunities for Vaughn was great. He saw 18 opportunities last week. I expect similar usage unless we were going to see out of the blue Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs suit up for this game. The rest of their backfield is 2 fullbacks, Bo Scarborough, who's just a camp body right now since Jalen Richard is hurt. He ended up only seeing 5 snaps last week. And then what that leaves you is B.J. Emmons. Emmons is really the only other running back in this backfield for Trey Ragas. And Emmons last week saw 18 overall snaps. He ended up seeing 9 opportunities. He was good. 9 yards, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Keeps him in play. But I'm expecting a heavy workload for Ragas, who's pushing for a roster spot. Next up is A.J. Rose Jr., who is the benefactor of a Kenny Ngannou injury last week. Hopefully he ends up recovering quickly, but he got hurt on the kickoff, did not play an offensive snap, and he's not playing this week. I do not expect Dalvin Cook to play this week. Last week, Alexander Mattison did not play. We'll track his status. But if Mattison plays, it'll be 1 or 2 drives. And if he doesn't play, all they have in this backfield right now is a fullback in Jake Bargas, Amir Abdullah, who's a solid option as well for this slate, and then A.J. Rose, who last week saw 25 rushing attempts, the most of anybody in the preseason, for 100 rushing yards. He ran 13 routes and saw a target. 26 opportunities. Again, since there was no Kenny Ngannou, he was not going to see this much usage. Ngannou was probably going to see about half of that usage, and Rose would have seen the rest of it. But he saw a spike. Now, I don't expect this much usage this week just because that's a massive workload, but I also expect some of that to factor over into Amir Abdullah. So A.J. Rose is firmly in play. I think his performance last week might give him a little bit more ownership than desired, but people still don't know the name. You might not even know the name or that he did that last week, so I'm not expecting massive ownership, but his teammate Amir Abdullah is also definitely in play. I mean, Abdullah last week played 18 snaps, but as of right now, they don't have anybody else on this roster. I don't expect him to sign somebody and play that guy the next day, so it seems like unless Alexander Mattison plays, Abdullah's 18 snaps are going to have to go up, and the 48 snaps that A.J. Rose saw probably go down. So if Rose plays 35 snaps, you say Abdullah gets up to 28 to 30 snaps. That's upside for Amir Abdullah, who saw 5 attempts on the ground last week. Not great, but he was fine. 29 yards, over 5 yards per carry. But the big thing was he saw a couple of targets on 10 routes run. He's a solid pass-catching running back. I mean, that's why he was drafted a couple years back as a second-round pick. The next man I want to talk about is Tylan Williams, who could potentially be the best play on the entire slate if some things break his way. I'm not expecting J.K. Dobbins to play much in this game. He only played 8 snaps last week. Gus Edwards did not play as he's been dealing with a little bit of bangs and bruises in camp. We'll track his status. And Justice Hill, who played 17 snaps last week for the Baltimore Ravens, has not practiced yet this week and is questionable. That does not bode well for a guy who's probably already made the team. 2 years ago, he has some solid draft capital in him, and he's been solid when he gets some spot performances like last year at the end of the season for the Ravens, so I'm not shocked to see him sit. All they would have left in this backfield is Nate McGarry, who saw 14 snaps last week, and Tylan Williams, who saw 36 snaps, led this backfield in week 1 of the preseason. A team-high 10 rushing attempts. But the big thing, he ran 20 routes last week, led all running backs in the preseason week 1. 5 targets, 5 catches, and 23 yards. He had over 7 fantasy points alone in the air, not even factoring in what he did on the ground. And now, potentially, there's not going to be an additional 17 snaps that Justice Hill took last week. He's already firmly in play for me. But if Justice Hill doesn't suit up, he is easily the number 1 running back play on the slate. And Nate McGarry, who I just said ended up having 14 snaps, not as elite of a play because he did not run a single route last week. All 20 went to Tylan Williams, so not great for McGarry, but he'll still be somewhat in play. Now, there's a couple other running backs I want to note of. I've got about 10 to 11 that are going to be in the tiers factored in somewhere. Priorities, not priorities. Jaylen Samuels has had 2 weeks because of the Hall of Fame game. Continues to play well. He had a team-high 10 attempts last week, a rushing touchdown on the ground, involved in the receiving game yet again for 20-plus snaps. He's in play. You have the Houston Texans backfield dealing with some injuries. The old men in Rex Burkhead and Mark Ingram are not playing. David Johnson and Mr. Philip Lindsay not expected to see much run, so that leaves Buddy Howell, who's mainly a special teams guy, Darius Jackson, who's been banged up, only saw 9 snaps last week, and the big one, Scotty Phillips, who saw a team high for the running back position, 34 snaps last week. He saw 13 attempts and 5 targets, 18 opportunities for Scotty Phillips, who has been on this roster before. He ended up having 17 touches in the game for almost 100 yards and a score. Be sure to get some Scotty Phillips in week 2. And the last name I'll mention is the backup to Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey not expected to play this week. And the other 2 big things, Rodney Smith and Reggie Bonifant did not play last week for the Panthers at the running back position, and those fellas this week have not practiced. So what that leaves in the backfield is Rod Smith, a fullback, Spencer Brown, who saw 21 snaps last week, Darius Clark, who saw 9, and then it's just going to leave Mr. Chuba Hubbard, the draft pick from this year's class, 28 snaps last week. He saw 7 rushing attempts and 4 targets. The big run that he had, a 59-yarder. Be sure to get some Chuba Hubbard as well. There is a Trenton Cannon in this backfield. He only played 1 offensive snap last week as a wide receiver. He's been playing as a wide receiver in camp. So what they're going to have in this backfield is basically 3 full running backs. One of them, Darius Clark, who's just a camp body at this point. I think you see the majority of the snaps go to 2 guys. Primarily Chuba Hubbard has the upside there. I've got about 8 more guys listed, but we'll save those for the tiers. If you want to see those breakdowns and where they rank out, you can check them out. Now, before we slide into the wide receiver position, I want to let you know about some of the props I've taken so far at the quarterback and running back position for tomorrow's slate. Now, we've profited every single day so far in props, so knock on wood for all the preseason games. We're up about $4,000, I think now, or $4,000 including the Hall of Fame game. So we can slide into those props right now. Now, there's going to be a lot more tomorrow. These are the only ones that they have up a day earlier because, they don't want to overexpose themselves and get destroyed by guys like us on the props and ladies like us. So I took Jaylen Samuels over 4.5 points, has easily cleared this number the first 2 games thus far. I expect him to see similar run. I've got him for about 7 to 7.5 points, over 4.5, easy for Jaylen Samuels. And Tyler Huntley. I think Huntley plays at least 2 quarters. Rushing upside on the ground. Easily cleared this 6.7 points last week, and that was with Trace McSorley playing almost half the game. Huntley has the actual ability. If Lamar Jackson gets ruled out, who has not been practicing much, COVID protocol in and out of that, if he does not play in this game, Lamar Jackson, there's a chance Tyler Huntley could play 100% of the game. So Tyler Huntley over 6.7 points. He might do that just on the ground alone this week. I took those 2 players, $50 to win $100. You can parlay it to win $150. If you want to use the code SAL, it's very simple. Use the code SAL, linked in the description below. You go in there, you use that code, and you will get a free first bet matched up to $100. $100 for free, matched up to it. So if you put $50 in, you place that bet, they'll give you 50 right on top of it. Bang, you got a nice bankroll to start with. So you can check that out. We'll have a lot more props in the Discord on Patreon down below, so be sure to get in there. Usually add anywhere from 2 to 5 to 6 more props throughout the day. And on a big slate like tomorrow, we're going to have a lot of action going on. Now, the wide receiver position is loaded. I mean, I have written down right now 14 priorities at the wide receiver position and 29 guys who are in play firmly for me. So I'm not going to go through every single one of those, but we'll single out a couple of guys. To start off, we'll go to the Indianapolis Colts, where Mike Strachan, I believe it's called actually Strachan, something like that. He is the 7th round pick from this year, first pick of the 7th round. He's a monster contested catch artist, athletic, fast, long, dynamic, speed, and burst, all this stuff. And he played last week, 34 snaps, ran 21 routes. He had 3 catches for 57 yards, a very solid stat line on 5 targets. The other 2 targets he actually dropped, so not good for him, but he's getting the ball thrown his way. So Mike Stratton is in play, and then his teammate Desmond Patton, who we actually liked last week as more of a lower-owned option. He was a 6th-round pick last year, also has size and speed, massive 215-pound guy, 90th percentile speed score. He played a massive 52 snaps. I like Patton more than Strachan. They're both in play, but he played 52 snaps last week. Led all the positional players in any single team on any single game outside of quarterbacks. He ran a team-high 28 routes, caught 5 balls for 49 yards, so he had 9.9 fantasy points, and he had 6 targets. Both of them firmly in play, but man, oh man, does Desmond Patton look oh so juicy. There's 3 receivers from the Ravens in play because the Ravens are dealing with a lot of injuries. Rashad Bateman, Marquise Brown, probably not playing. Sammy Watkins has been banged up and has not been practicing this week. He's probably not playing. So there's 3 receivers already down. And then you look at Miles Boykin, who has not been practicing. He missed last week. Deon Cain, who's slowly working back into practice. I don't think he's going to be able to play this short notice. He might not play. So they might be down 5 receivers, definitely down 3, probably 4, and potentially 5 guys. So what you saw last week was Tylan Wallace, the rookie for this year. He ended up playing 45 snaps. He ran over 25 routes. He's in play this week, especially if those injuries hold up. James Proschitz ended up running last week, 25 routes. He saw a couple of targets. He's in play. But the guy I like the most from this team is a guy who saw a lot of NFL action last year, and they want to continue to develop him. Was a special teams guy, played the slot for them last year as a rookie, and that's Devin Duvernay, who played 39 snaps, who ran 24 routes and had 6 targets because, he's already an NFL pro. He knows how to separate as a sophomore. 4 catches for 28 yards. Not the best stat line, not the most standing off the page stat line, but definitely respectable. And there's even more guys like Jalen Moore on this Baltimore team that ran a lot of routes and looked good. But let's slide over to Tampa Bay, where Jalen Darton, the rookie this year out of a small school, last week ran 16 routes and was targeted 6 times. Now, I'm not going to expect another 40% targets there this week, but I think he can play some more snaps. It seems like he's going to make the team. This team is loaded with wide receivers. Darton is my favorite Tampa Bay receiver and probably favorite receiver from that game. His teammate Tyler Johnson is also firmly in play, who played a lot last year, played in the Super Bowl. He just didn't see the field as much because they signed Antonio Brown. Otherwise, he was going to play a lot more last year. He did the first half of the season. But Tyler Johnson last week played 30 snaps, ran 20 routes. Most of them out of the slot, but a solid player nonetheless. He stands out as being in play. Now, Terrace Marshall Jr. last week, he ran, 15 routes or so for Carolina. You didn't see Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore. He had the big catch down the sideline that really inflated his stats. I'll say that he's in play, but he might go a little overowned. I want to talk about some names that you probably don't know about, but saw insane usage. You might not ever hear their names again after this preseason. But Keelan Doss played 44 snaps last week and ran 31 routes. He had 6 catches on 6 targets for 55 yards. Keelan Doss for the Las Vegas Raiders, I believe, is firmly in play this week, and his teammate DJ Turner is also firmly in play because he ran 27 routes, saw 8 targets. 8 targets, 7 catches, 43 yards, had over 11 fantasy points with that usage. Those guys are going to get usage again. And the main reason why is this is a shallow depth chart at wide receiver. Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards probably not going to play. John Brown, the old man at this point, only ended up seeing 7 snaps. I expect that to continue. Willie Snead, an older player who's dealing with injuries. Don't expect him to play much. Hunter Renfrow didn't play much last week as a starter. So that's 5 receivers right there. All they have left in the depth chart after that is 5 guys to play 4 quarters, or the majority of 4 quarters. Expect DJ Turner, expect also Keelan Doss to see a lot of run. I'd prefer Turner than Keelan Doss, but both of them are firmly in play. The next name that you never heard of and probably never will again, but J.J. Kosi. He played 48 snaps last week. He ended up playing those snaps for the Los Angeles Rams. This Rams team is sitting all their starters. And Van Jefferson was dealing with COVID last week. He's like their wide receiver 4 right now, but it seems like they want to sit him too. This is already a very shallow depth chart at wide receiver. They only have 10 wide receivers, and they're sitting 4 of those wide receivers. So Tutu Atwell is in play. The rookie played 26 snaps, ran 18 routes last week. But the guy I like the most is J.J. Koski because he ran 31 routes. It's just opportunity at this point. Played 48 snaps. Played basically the entire game. He had 3 catches for 36 yards, but he had a lot of opportunities with those routes run. He is my favorite Rams player on a depth chart that has absolutely no bodies going. We've talked about them for 2 weeks now. Malik Turner's dealing with an injury for the Cowboys, but he continues to dominate both the Hall of Fame game and last week. Looks like he's going to be on this roster, the veteran. 6 targets last week. Simeon Foco for the Cowboys, who ran 22 routes, saw 4 targets. Big body receiver, mainly a jump ball artist. Not the fastest of guys, but a red zone body for sure. I do prefer Foco because he's not dealing with an injury. We'll track Malik Turner's injury, and if he ends up missing, of course, we'll update it in the tiers and rearrange these guys. And the last guy I want to talk about, I know we're talking about a lot of guys. I literally have like another 18 that are going to be in the tiers one way or another. Tariq Black, Kay Johnson, Rico Bussey, all these guys, right? Dan Chisna, Nico Collins, Mason, all these guys. Deontay Johnson will be even in there. Anthony Johnson. So they'll be in there. Check the tiers down below. But Tom Kennedy saw a lot of usage last week because there's a lot of injuries for Detroit. We have to track this. Rashad Perriman did not play last week. You did not see Quinton Cephas play, who did return to practice this week. There was no Damian Ratley. There was no Chad Hansen. They were down a lot of bodies. But Tom Kennedy was expected to play a lot, and he did play a lot. A team-leading 21 routes run last week. Most out of the slot, though, but he did see 6 targets. So that's the last guy that I will be chatting about the wide receiver position. And now I have 12 names written down at tight end, 7 of them of which are priorities and better plays than the other 5. I'm not going to go into all of them. You can see the rest on the Patreon tiers. But the first ones that I will talk about is Tanner Hudson, 2019 preseason Hall of Famer. Last week was also solid. He ran 16 routes for Tampa Bay. He saw 6 targets, 4 catches for 48 yards. That's almost as good as it gets in the preseason. Next up for the Rams is a converted wide receiver that they just drafted in Jacob Harris. He's been playing tight end. He ran 22 routes last week, saw 7 targets. This guy might be better than Tanner Hudson for this slate. 4 catches, 43 yards. He's built like a wide receiver, but he's playing tight end, and you get the positionality there. So Jacob Harris, Tanner Hudson, 2 names that stand out early on. Some other names that stand out from an opportunity standpoint. Josh Oliver, a name that we've heard before, played 51 snaps and ran a massive 32 routes at the tight end position for Baltimore. Mark Andrews did not play, and Nick Boyle, who's rehabbing an ACL, did not play. Expect similar usage this week for Josh Oliver, who had 5 targets, 4 catches, and 22 yards last week. Kylan Granson for the Colts, the rookie, continues to get hyped up in camp, and he was decent last week. You saw 4 targets, but he only ran 14 routes. Compared to guys like Josh Oliver running 32 and Harris running 22, it's harder to play Granson, but he does have a lot of talent, and you might see that number creep up even a little bit bit this week. Another rookie in Tommy Tremble. So we got a couple more rookies to talk about here, but Tommy Tremble last week ran 13 routes, saw 4 targets, and scored a touchdown as a big-bodied red zone option. Again, not my favorite of options, but definitely strongly in play as he's a rookie who will be running routes. The rookie tight end for Houston actually saw a lot of usage because Jordan Atkins did not play, their starting tight end, and that is Brevin Jordan out of Miami. He ran 17 routes and saw 3 targets on 22 snaps in week 1. And we'll finish it up with a final guy, and that man's name is going to be Nick Bowers. Now, Nick Bowers, just like Josh Oliver, massive snaps. 50 snaps last week for Nick Bowers. He only ran 13 routes, though, so if those snaps come down at all to like 40, which is still a lot, he might only run like 9 routes. So I just want to let you know he's on the field a lot, but not getting as much opportunity. So Tanner Hudson, Jacob Harris, and Josh Oliver really stand out at the tight end position. There's like 6 other guys that I've written down, Nick Eubanks, John Rain. They'll all be put into the tiers on Patreon, which I would appreciate it. If you want to join the community down below, you can check that out. A lot of sports, not just the NFL, MLB, PGA, MMA, covering it all every single day, optimizers, tools, all that stuff. But right here, the preseason football, we got a shit ton of stuff for all of you. So there you go. A whole bunch of football and a beautiful fade and a beautiful shirt. I hope you enjoyed this one right here because this is a massive slate. 2 games on Sunday, 1 on Monday. We'll be covering them. I will not be live for this because it's a Saturday, and this video alone will be giving you a lot that you need to be prepared for, along with the Patreon tools. And I'm going to be, chilling out, relaxing, maxing all cool. Maybe go get myself a brewski spend my $1 on some brewskis at the beer gardens. Who knows? But we're going to have a good time. It's the summer. The summer's wrapping up. Preseason football, the indicator that the real season is almost here. So I appreciate it if you want to hit the like and subscribe button before you go. Any major changes that might come out if they're not addressed in this video, it's because they had not already come out before I recorded this video, and they will be updated in the tiers on Patreon. Support that sponsor and, get some prize picks in, get some props in action. Go ahead and get the Tyler Huntley over and that Jaylen Samuels over. Way more props coming out. We'll talk about them in the Discord. You all rock. I appreciate you. Big Saturday slate number 2 of the preseason done. 1 more to go. See ya in the next one.